They say the land never forgets. Even in the silence of the endless Australian outback, where the winds speak in the voice of the dead and the red earth swallows secrets whole, something lingers. Something ancient. Something angry. Our story begins not in the present, but in the faded, brittle remnants of what used to be. Towns without names, stations left to rot, roads that no longer appear on any map, whose pavement has cracked like skin long decayed, whose signposts spin uselessly in the wind. Somewhere past Cuba PD, where the land stops pretending to be livable and the world is little more than scorched gravel and horizon, there is a turnoff. No sign, just a sagging wire fence with an open gate, rusted, forgotten. Beyond it, a narrow strip of worn asphalt curls like a scar across the belly of the desert. Locals call it Carroll's Vein, though no one can say why. Officially, the road doesn't exist, yet maps from the early 1900s show a connection there. A forgotten supply route built by rail workers during the feverish rush to tame the interior. A stretch of gravel meant to link the transient town of Erela, now lost to time, with a smattering of cattle stations. But all those ventures collapsed. People vanished, not left, vanished. And so did the road. Until recently. It was a chance encounter in a dusty pub that led me here. A sun-bitten man with cataract eyes leaning too close, breath rich with whiskey and rot, said, "You looking to write about the ghosts, journo? You want stories? Find the vein, drive it. But don't go past the mile marker with no number. Past there, time don't work right. People don't stay dead." I laughed at the time, but I didn't forget. 3 months later, I'm standing at the edge of that fence, camera in hand, recorder ready, and a satellite phone blinking weakly. There's no signal. There hasn't been for the last 100 kilometers. Even the rental GPS stutters, freezing on an empty screen before giving up entirely. I push open the gate. Carroll's Vein stretches ahead of me, devoured by sand in places, hemmed in by brittle spinifex and blackened stumps that shouldn't be here. Trees, charred and lifeless. No fire's been reported in this region for over a decade. But something burned this land. Driving slowly, I follow the path, and it becomes obvious that this was no ordinary supply road. There are patterns, half-seen symbols scorched into the stone shoulders, too deliberate to be graffiti. Someone etched them, repeatedly, like they were trying to keep something in, or out. 50 kilometers in, I find the first remains of habitation, Clint Downs, or what's left of it. A township built in the early 20th century to house a mine's workforce. There's a post office leaning on one hip, its roof caved in and mailboxes torn open. A church missing its bell, windows smashed. And homes, all stripped bare, as if something swept through with precision, leaving only bones behind. The journal of a station nurse lies on a desk, pages crisp despite the exposure. March 3rd, 1928. They came out of the dust again, the children first, empty-eyed, walking in step. No footprints. Father Mac saw them from the bell tower. He tried to ring the alarm, but the bell cracked in his hands. We're told not to look at them directly. They whisper, say names. Sometimes they say yours. It's not the only account. There are dozens of handwritten notes, scrawled warnings across peeling walls. Don't sleep in the church. The sun is wrong here. We buried her. She came back. Each piece unravels the myth and ties it to something real, something lost in government records and time. A pattern of settlements established and erased within a narrow stretch of desert. The inhabitants always vanish. No bodies ever found. More disturbing is the consistency of detail, across time and across unrelated sources. Children that walk out of the dunes. Whispers in the dust. Shadows that stay even when the sun moves. I record everything. Photographs, audio, even thermal readings, though they fluctuate wildly. At one moment, the vein reads at 46 degrees. A second later, 2 degrees. then back again. My satellite phone flickers on just long enough to receive one corrupted message. Turn back, eyes in, vein bleeds. I stop at a mile marker made of iron, no number carved, but etched with a symbol. A spiral of thorns. It matches the patterns I've seen scorched into the roadside rocks. And then I hear it. From the static of the recorder, a child's voice, impossibly close, though no one's near. You're almost home. The car won't start, not right away. The engine clicks, turns, stalls. A sound in the back seat, like breath. I spin, heart clawing up my throat, nothing. The engine finally catches. I don't look behind me again. Not until I'm back past the gate, back on real land. But I know what I saw, what I heard, what I read. This is only the beginning. Somewhere past Clint Downs, something waits, and it has waited for a long, long time. I will go back. I have to. And this time, I will keep driving past the mile marker, even if it means not coming back. Join me as I uncover the cursed legacy of the Outback's forgotten roads, a story buried by time, abandoned by reason, but still alive in the dust. Subscribe to the channel if you're ready to journey deeper into the nightmare veins of this ancient land. New episodes every week. This is Cursed Roads of the Outback. There's a silence in the Outback that doesn't feel natural, the kind that presses against your ears like pressure underwater. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something else, waiting for you to notice it. After I crossed back through the rusted gate that day, I spent weeks researching everything I could about Clint Downs, Carol's Vein, and the whispered name that had started to recur in the journals and letters, Erela. It's not on any current map. Google Earth shows nothing, just a stretch of pale dust and rust-coloured sand. No roads, no ruins, nothing. But buried in the National Archives of South Australia, scanned in a folder labelled simply, Failed Infrastructure Projects, Inland Expansion, 1912-1935, I found a single map, hand-drawn, poorly faded, and there, dead centre, marked with a tiny red X, was Erela Township. No rail lines reached it. The map was dated 1916, and in the margins, someone had scribbled a phrase in a hard-angled cursive, marked for reclamation, reopened once, never again. No documents explained what reopened once meant. And that wasn't the only reference. In the personal papers of Dr. Alastair Penman, a geologist who surveyed the area during the mining boom of the 1920s, I uncovered an unpublished article. Half essay, half panicked confession, typed with erratic spacing and unfinished sentences. It described something far stranger than mere geological anomalies. Penman claimed to have visited Erela in 1925, when the town was unofficially reopened by private investors, hoping to mine a deep quartz vein said to pulse with opalescent light, like stone soaked in moonlight. He was hired to determine the viability of the area, but the piece quickly spiraled into madness. I warned them, he wrote, warned them that the fault line was unnatural. The stones sang. At night, they sang, like breath caught between dimensions. We drilled no more than 30 feet before the drill bit cracked like brittle glass, and a sound came up through the borehole that made men bleed from their noses. Something in the quartz wasn't dead. It knew us. Penman was institutionalized less than a year later. Everything pointed back to Erela. So I did the only thing that made sense. I went looking. Armed with the faded map, a full tank of fuel, a drone, and 2 days of rations, I followed the faint outline of Carol's Vein again, this time not stopping at the spiral mile marker. The further in I drove, the more the land forgot itself. Trees that didn't match local flora appeared, standing like skeletal guardians with bark that peeled back in thin, papery curls, revealing a red-black wood underneath. Rocks bore carvings too deliberate to be the result of erosion, geometric shapes, spirals within spirals, angular eyes with no pupils. I stopped the car and launched the drone. 10 minutes out, the feed started cutting with static, then resumed, showing glimpses of what I first mistook for termite mounds or crumbling hills. But they were structures, low, worn by time, half buried under dunes and spinifex, a grid-like layout, roads, foundations, Erela. I marked the coordinates and followed the signal. It took another 2 hours of crawling over semi-buried roads and dry creek beds before I reached the outer limits. What remains of Erela is not dead, it's suspended. Time hasn't quite passed here the way it should have. The buildings, or what's left of them, are too intact. Timber too straight. Metal too uncorroded. As if the town had only just been abandoned. Yet the signs of age exist. Vines, sand, dust. A contradiction wrapped in red silence. There is no graffiti. No signs of vandals or scavengers. And no wildlife. I parked the car at what had once been the Erela General Store. The sign still swung overhead on rusted chains. I stepped inside with camera rolling, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The air reeks of ozone and old blood. Shelves stand in place, cans lined up, untouched. One even bore a date stamp, 1924. My fingers brushed it. The label flaked away like moth wings. Beneath it, something had been scratched into the can's tin side. Don't let her speak. The message repeats across other surfaces. Tables, walls, the back of a child's schoolbook found in the post office. Don't let her speak. She lives in the earth. Eyes in the quartz. The nursery is open. I began to feel watched. At first it was simple paranoia, but then came the drone, which I'd left circling above for aerial shots. Its return flight path brought it back overhead, but the feed showed something impossible. The footage, upon review, shows me walking through the center of Erela, but I wasn't alone. Following me, 10 meters behind, silent, unmoving, was a child in white, a girl, no older than 10, her face blurred, not by motion, but as if it refused to be captured by the lens, where her features should have been, static, like a television caught between stations. I never saw her with my own eyes, only in the footage. Back in the post office, I found another document, an evacuation order signed by a Captain Elric Harrow, dated March 6, 1928, the same week referenced in the Clint Downs Nurses' Journal. It reads, "To all remaining residents, do not attempt to leave on foot. Stay indoors between dusk and dawn. Do not follow the singing. If a child knocks at your door, you are not to answer. Burn this letter after reading. May God have mercy on us all." It wasn't burned. It was nailed to the doorframe. That night I camped in the car, parked beneath a half-collapsed petrol station canopy. Sleep was impossible. The desert made noise here, but not the kind you're used to. Not wind. Not animals. This was a kind of chanting, too low to understand, too rhythmic to be natural. My recorder picked it up faintly, and when reversed, the spectrogram shows patterns, like words. 3, over and over. Bring her voice. At 3:17 a.m., the passenger side door unlocked. I hadn't touched it. I know I hadn't. Nothing entered the vehicle. No prints, no footsteps in the dust. But in the front seat, cradled gently, lay a child's porcelain doll. Dirty, cracked at the temple, eyes painted shut. Attached to its hand, another note. She wants to sing again. I left Erela before dawn, but I am going back. The answers aren't in the buildings. They're under them. Something was unearthed beneath this town. Something buried deep, then covered up by authorities, perhaps even sealed using old rites. Not religious, older, pagan, aboriginal, but twisted, perverted. In part 3, I'll return with excavation gear, a team of 1, because no one else will follow me out here anymore. They've seen the footage, and they saw the girl. I didn't dream the night I left Erela. Dreams don't come back with you. Whatever that place is, or was, it doesn't just cling to your clothes and breath and bones. It hollows something out. And when you return to the comfort of real-world distractions, warm water, flickering lamps, your name on a lease, you realize the part that was stolen isn't coming back. 2 weeks passed before I could look at the footage again. Not the drone recordings. Those I had already studied frame by frame. But the thermal camera, mounted to the dash as I passed through the town. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the time the car door unlocked, the temperature drops by 27 degrees in under 2 seconds. Then, a bloom of heat erupts from the ground beneath the petrol station. A pulse, like a heart, like something beneath Erela woke up, and it didn't go back to sleep. My hands shook watching it. That's when I made the decision. No more watching. No more recording from the edges. This time, I go beneath the surface. This time, I bring shovels. And I bring the doll. Back in Adelaide, I found an aging geotechnical engineer named Lyle Tremaine, a man who once consulted for a remote construction project out near what used to be the Garn Railway expansion zones. He retired early, following what he described only as a spiritual breach. I asked him about Carol's vein. His mouth dried instantly. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he leaned forward and whispered, "They thought it was opal. It wasn't. What they tapped into wasn't stone. It was something preserved, like cartilage, like egg. We cut into the wrong part of the world." He wouldn't say more, but he gave me a name. Project Palewash, a Cold War-era operation buried in a series of declassified documents from ASIO, Australia's internal security agency. On paper, Palewash was a radiation monitoring program tied to British nuclear testing further west. But buried in the redacted lines and offhand memos was this phrase: "Containment continues at Erela Site B. Subsurface resonance persists. Recommend ritual lock reapplication quarterly. Do not skip." Ritual. That word doesn't appear in government documents unless the people writing them no longer have control. Armed with coordinates from an old surveyor's notebook and a series of encoded map layers decrypted from ASIO's digital archive, I returned to Erela, not just to visit, to dig. I parked outside what was once the town's community hall. The door was missing, and the walls were scorched black at their base, yet no signs of fire damage elsewhere. The heat came from below. Inside, beneath a warped stage platform, I found what I was looking for. A trap door, iron, bolted shut, reinforced with a ring of red ochre and ash, forming a spiral not unlike the mile marker etched back on Carol's vein. The same spiral. It took hours to open. The bolts weren't rusted. They had fused, melted, maybe, or deliberately sealed with some kind of resin. When I finally cracked them, the door groaned. Not metal on metal, but like breath expelled from an old lung. I lowered myself down by rope. 15 feet, 20. Then I hit stone, not carved, not natural, grown. It took my breath. It wasn't like standing in a basement or mine shaft. It was like entering the ribcage of something too large to understand. The walls pulsed faintly with heat signatures invisible to the naked eye, but blazing on my thermal camera. Shapes moved behind the stone, trapped or sleeping. I didn't know which terrified me more. I moved deeper. The hallway, if you could call it that, narrowed and twisted in a way that made it impossible to walk straight. I found carvings here, but not made by tools. They looked grown into the rock, like veins hardening into fossilized nerve endings. Then I found the chamber, circular, 20 feet wide. At its center, a slab of stone, a table, but with no markings. Just a shape, the same childlike silhouette from my drone footage, etched shallow into the rock. Arms to the sides, eyes closed, no mouth. That's when the doll I had brought, the one left for me in the car, began to warm in my backpack. Not heat, movement. I took it out, placed it on the stone slab. The moment it touched the surface, the temperature around me dropped so rapidly that frost formed on the lens of my camera. Then came the voice. A whisper, but not in my ears, in my teeth, my bones, the root of my skull. She remembers. I tried to run. I slipped. My shoulder dislocated on impact. The flashlight skittered across the stone, its beam catching something on the far side of the chamber. A wall of faces, pressed into the stone, not carved, as if the rock had swallowed them mid-scream. Some were children. Some older. Some not human at all. They weren't fossilized. They were watching. The whisper came again, louder. She remembers your name now. I don't know how I made it back up the rope. I don't remember climbing. I only remember crawling into the car at dawn, arm dangling useless, throat raw from screaming. The trapdoor was shut behind me, closed on its own. The spiral on the floor had changed. Now, instead of an eye in the center, there was a mouth. Open. It's been 3 days. I haven't left my apartment. I hear things at night, humming, from under the floorboards, from the drain. The singing, soft and distant, like a child in the next room. I've checked the doll. It's no longer cracked. Its eyes are open now, and the mouth is smiling. In part 4, I will attempt to translate the patterns discovered inside the chamber, using AI imaging reconstruction and cross-reference with early Aboriginal Dreamtime cave symbols. Though I warn you, the alignments suggest this is something older than even those tales, something that may not have ever been part of our world. Some of you have asked, why do I keep going? Because I think we already woke it up, and it's not going back to sleep. The humming doesn't stop. It doesn't come from the outside world anymore, not the vents, not the hallways, not the city noise bleeding through the thin windows of my apartment. It comes from the walls inside me, behind my eyes, beneath the skin. A resonance that vibrates my bones like tuning forks. She's learning the words. It's not madness. It's memory. Memory not my own, being rewritten, overwritten, sung into place, syllable by syllable, until there's no line left between what I know and what she remembers. But I still have time. I believe that. If I can understand what the chamber was, what that place beneath Erela is, or was meant to hold, maybe I can stop what's coming, or at least tell you how to survive it. So I began to dig, not into Earth, but into myths. Not the comfortable Dreamtime stories written down in school books, but the unpublished oral records kept by a few private curators and sacred custodians from the Pitjantjatjara, Yankunytjatjara, and Adnyamathanha peoples. Records only shared through trust and, in rare cases, necessity. After long negotiation and hours of whispered conversations that felt more like confessions than interviews, I heard a name. Not spoken, drawn. 3 interlocking spirals, always opening, never closing. Beneath it, a single symbol, a mouth with no tongue. It matches the spiral on the trapdoor. They called her Ngari Wintala. Translation is slippery, but the closest phrase is, the daughter who was buried to sing the earth to sleep. She is not a god. She is not a demon. She is something older, something sent down, not born. According to one whisper keeper, an elderly man who lives without electricity on the edge of the Simpson Desert, Ngari Wintala was not worshipped. She was locked away, buried beneath the land as part of an ancient agreement struck between the sky and the blood of the earth. She was meant to keep dreaming, singing to keep the desert bones asleep. But the song has gone quiet, because we woke her up. Using AI patterning, I analysed the spirals and geometric veins from the chamber walls. I fed them into an algorithm trained on symbolic language recognition. The results were alarming. The pattern matches no human script. Not Aboriginal, not Sumerian, not Proto-Indo-European, but but it does appear in fragments, in Neolithic burial mounds in Anatolia, pre-dynastic Egyptian cave glyphs, untranslated, Mesoamerican underworld murals, redacted in national archives, an unearthed subterranean temple in eastern Siberia, catalogued by Soviet archaeologists and never spoken of again. In all cases, the structures resonate, literally. Sub-audible frequencies recorded inside these ancient places hum at a consistent range of 17 Hz, known as the frequency of fear. The same frequency my recorder picked up in the Airala chamber. This is not cultural overlap. It's a lattice, a global containment web, spanning epochs, civilizations and tongues, all centered on sealing something beneath. And it was working, until the mining drills cracked the vein, until the stone bled, until we dug too deep. I went back to the footage. I slowed it down, frame by frame. At the moment I placed the doll on the slab, just as the frost began to form, the drone feed overhead captured something extraordinary, though no one would notice unless they knew what to look for. The sand around Airala shifted. A circle, a perfect circle, 2 kilometers wide, distended outward by maybe 2 or 3 inches, like something inhaled below the surface. Not collapse, not erosion, breath. And the sound in the recorder wasn't just whispering. Using audio deconvolution and granular synthesis, I extracted a layered phrase, buried beneath the noise. A voice, childlike, but low, too low. It said, "I know your name now. I will need your mouth." I hadn't told anyone my real name during this project. I operate under pseudonyms for safety. I use burner phones, private servers. Everything about this investigation has been locked behind triple encryption and offline backups. But this morning, the doll, the one I had locked in a lead-lined case, was sitting on my kitchen table. My name was written on the wall above it, not carved. Sung. How do I know? Because the paint has no brush strokes. It's vibrated, arranged by tone and frequency, into sigils that match the stone chamber beneath Airala. She doesn't need tools. She has me. She's inside the vein now, and the vein is in everything. The old road, the old towns, the buried things in the quartz, and maybe even the language itself. I tried burning the doll. The fire refused to catch. The flames curved around it, dancing like wind, then extinguished. When I touched it again, against all instinct, it whispered something different. This time, in my voice. We're almost ready. Next week, I'll return with ground-penetrating radar and magnetic anomaly sensors. I believe there is a second chamber beneath the town. A larger one, not for containment, but for emergence. I believe the slab I found is not a prison. It's an altar, and altars are built for offerings. I will go back alone. No crew, no transmissions, only a fail-safe. A self-erasing transmitter that will upload this file if I fail to check in. Because something is coming, and it wants an audience. It's been 60 hours since I crossed back into the perimeter of Airala. No signal, no clouds, no sound, except them. The humming has grown, not louder, denser. It doesn't hum in the air anymore. It hums in the matter, in the metal of my tools, the glass of my windshield, my teeth. It harmonizes with itself like a buried chorus, rising and falling in tones that feel pre-linguistic, not made for the human throat. And through it, she sings. Her voice comes from everywhere and nowhere, but always it sounds younger. The child I saw in the drone footage, or perhaps a mouthless echo of her, follows me now. I haven't seen her directly since entering the site again, but I feel her footsteps behind me in the dust. I hear her breath. She is patient. She is waiting. But not for me, for the others. Let me tell you what I found. I returned to the trapdoor in the ruins of the community hall. The spiral was still there, but it had grown, extended, with new lines, new grooves that curled outward like branches. When viewed from above by drone, the updated spiral now stretches across 3 buildings. Perfect symmetry. It's not random. It's notation, a score, sheet music, encoded in dirt and ruin. And it's not meant to be read. It's meant to be sung. Using my ground-penetrating radar, I began mapping the area beneath the town. The data shocked me. Beneath Erela is not a chamber. It is an organ, a biological structure fossilized in quartz and sandstone, the size of a stadium. Dozens of interconnected tunnels, rib-like struts, vein-thick mineral deposits running through it, all pulsing with measurable electromagnetic resonance. This is not a metaphor. The GPR images show something that appears organic in nature, but geologically impossible, unless the formation was grown, not formed. And at its heart, a second altar. This one shaped like a cradle, not empty, not anymore. I saw her, not the child, not the doll, her, the thing the locals feared, the thing the mind tried to drill through, the thing Penman wrote about before his mind broke. She lies curled, sleeping, though even that word fails. She is not dead, not alive, she is becoming. The GPR scan shows movement, slow, rhythmic. She's gestating, and around her, hundreds of mouths, grown into the stone. Not full faces, just mouths. Open. They breathe when she exhales. They hum when she stirs. They are her choir. You remember the diary entries from Clint Downs, the ones that spoke of the children who walked from the dunes. I found the original census log. 23 children vanished during the final weeks of the town's collapse. No remains recovered, no footprints. The ground was described as undisturbed. I now believe they were taken, or perhaps restructured. Reborn into the choir beneath Erela. Absorbed not in body, but voice. Their names are inscribed in a pattern on the altar I found. Not written, but etched in. Vibration, like audio ripples turned solid. They were transcribed. I placed a microphone near the edge of the cradle, connected to my solar rig. For 6 hours, nothing. Then, at 2:03 a.m., it began. Voices, 23, layered and looped in an impossible harmony. Singing what I can only describe as a lullaby that violates known physics. Pitch bends, temporal phasing, backward harmonics that shouldn't be possible. I fed it into an AI sound mapping engine. The spectrogram revealed something horrifying. A shape, the doll's face, perfectly replicated in light and sound, smiling, with its painted eyes now wide open. I have not slept. I dare not. When I doze, even for seconds, I wake with songs in my throat. Not just humming, but syllables I do not understand. My tongue moves without me. My lips tremble, forming notes. I began coughing blood this morning. The liquid was dark, too dark. It shimmered faintly under light, flecked with tiny crystalline particles. I examined them under magnification. They were not clots, they were quartz. Singing at 17 hertz. It's spreading. I'm being hollowed out. The singing isn't coming from beneath me anymore. It's coming from within me. I went to destroy the equipment, all of it. The drone, the GPR rig, the microphones, the data drives. But she stopped me, not with force, with grief. I heard it, in the song, a new layer, a crying, soft, terrified, not for herself, but for us. She wasn't buried here to be worshipped. She was buried to be contained, yes, but not for her sake, for ours. And now, the song is almost complete. I believe that Erela, the town, the name, the project, was never about mining, never about settlement. It was a cage, a capstone, each building aligned with cardinal nodes on the underground formation. The spirals weren't art. They were seals, active ones, that required sound and pattern to maintain containment. But the seal is broken, not from within, from above, by the drills, by the roads, by the vibrations of our machines. We were the key, and we've turned. Now she knows our words, our rhythm, our mouths. She will use them. She will sing herself into the world. There is one last thing, a message that came through the microphone at 3:33 a.m., encoded between the harmonics. A phrase, distorted but clear. The sky forgot the pact. The ground will remember. The mouths will open, and we will learn to listen. I will attempt to reach the cradle again, this time not to record, to speak back. Maybe, just maybe, she can still be reasoned with. Maybe the child I saw in the drone, the voice that mimicked mine, is not the threat. Maybe she's the warning. In part 6, I will enter the core of the cradle alone, equipped with resonance-cancelling tones and a final line of defense, silence. Because if sound is the weapon, then silence is the seal. And if I fail, let this be the last song you hear. I began the descent at twilight. There is no real night in Erela anymore, not darkness in the traditional sense. The sky dims, yes, but the ground glows, faintly, rhythmically, as if exhaling bioluminescent breath from lungs too deep to measure. The cradle beneath the town pulses now in perfect tempo with that glow, a heartbeat of light and a lullaby of ruin. I am no longer documenting this for science. This is not journalism. This is not mythological analysis. This is containment, or a last attempt at it. Before I left, I buried all previous footage drives and hard copies in a remote vault outside of Woomera, with biometric encryption and a time lock set to trigger a cascade release to national networks should I fail to return. If this video uploads, that means the worst has happened. That means the seal did not hold, and she is no longer asleep. The theory is simple. If the vein responds to resonance, to vibration, to sound, then perhaps it can be countered by its inverse, an active frequency dead zone. A zone where no sound lives, not suppressed, destroyed, a complete anacoustic field, the silence protocol. Developed covertly during Cold War era deep earth tunneling, the tech was designed to allow soldiers to enter volatile frequency zones without triggering seismic wake reactions. The military application was abandoned, but fragments of the project survive. Through a former research associate from the Melbourne Institute of Acoustics, a man who now lives in seclusion, I acquired a resonance disruptor, housed in a briefcase-sized unit, powered by chemical battery, and mounted with a self-destruct fuse. It has only one charge, one field burst, 6 seconds of absolute null, a space where no sound exists, where waveforms collapse before birth. If the entity beneath Erela requires resonance, if the vein is its tongue, its voice, its means of becoming, then silence may not just hurt her, it may unbind her. The entrance to the cradle had changed. What was once a narrow shaft beneath the community hall had become a wound, a rupture in the earth itself, circular, oozing a slow drip of opalized ichor from its lip. The air smelled sweet, too sweet, like rot soaked in sugar. The humming was gone, not silent, waiting. I lowered myself in. The chamber had grown. Walls that once closed around me now towered beyond light range. My headlamp caught glimpses of movement, not scurrying, not predatory, swaying. Hundreds of human-sized shapes hanging from the ceiling in clusters, wrapped in thin crystal shells, humming in sleep. Choir nodes, each with a mouth, some still forming, some whispering with no sound, their vibrations muted by some unknown membrane. But I felt them in my teeth, in my spine. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I walked toward the cradle. It is no longer a slab. It is alive, twisting, blooming, calcifying and softening like something unborn, but sentient. At its center, her form lay curled, no longer child-shaped. The limbs are too long now. The skin, once translucent, is hardening. cracking from the inside with geometric fractures that reveal light. And she was singing, not aloud, not yet, but the melody lived in every molecule of the space around her, a song with no source. It is the air, the stone, the blood in my ears, and I felt it pulling at me, not with force, with memory, with promise. She does not threaten. She offers. She asks, "Would you like to stop forgetting?" I stood at the edge of the cradle, disruptor in hand. My thumb hovered over the trigger, and then I saw them. Children, not real, not flesh. Memory echoes. The 23 lost from Clint Downs, and others. A procession, drifting through the chamber, barefoot and dust-covered. Some blinked at me, some smiled. One mouthed the word, "Father." Another mouthed, "Join." None of them were real. All of them were true. The silence protocol began warming. The disruptor hissed as the chamber's pressure fought against the anacoustic field. An invisible war between vibration and void. The choir above me stirred. The crystal cracked. Voices began to bleed through. And then she stood, not fully, not yet. Her legs cracked backward like a calving glacier, her mouth opening wider than it should. A hollow gate into not music, but meaningless pitch, a waveform without logic, a song from before language. I triggered the field. Silence. A forceful, violent silence that collapsed everything. The choir screamed in vacuum. The walls folded. The crystal shattered inward. Light bent. My eardrums ruptured from the absence, not the volume. She fell. The song cut off. The cradle cracked, and I ran. The chamber did not collapse, but the resonance is different now. Quiet. Not dead. Muted. I believe the protocol worked, not destroyed her, but set her back. Maybe for days, maybe for decades, but not forever. The vein still glows, the sigils still shift. The doll is gone, and on the inside of my arm, a new spiral has appeared beneath the skin. It moves when I breathe. She is not gone. She is marked, and I am the mouth she chose. In part 7, I will analyze the biological changes to my body since the cradle exposure, including blood anomalies, neuro-linguistic shifts, and the sudden ability to perceive hidden spirals in language and architecture around the world. Something was seeded in me, and she's not finished singing. It started with the dreams, not nightmares. That would have been easier to categorize, easier to resist. These are inviting, familiar, dreamscapes that feel like home, but not mine. Landscapes twisted with geometry that breathes, skies hung with impossible inverted constellations, and music, always music, that seems to rewrite itself as I listen. When I wake, I remember every note. And worse, I understand them. They form a language, not spoken, not heard, but embedded in things, textures, cracks in concrete, the way a ceiling fan hums. I don't hear sounds anymore. I translate them. Every creak, every whisper of wind through dead trees now tells me things I shouldn't know. I no longer need instruments to hear her. She's inside me. And I'm beginning to believe I was meant to be. When I returned to the city, I underwent medical evaluation under an assumed identity. Private clinic, no digital records. I told the doctors I had been exposed to an unknown mineral compound in a collapsed cave. Radiation, they assumed. Chemical hallucination, maybe. They ran tests. Blood, tissue, MRI. They found nothing conclusive, but their language began to shift after day 2. Notes that I managed to acquire before disappearing from the premises included phrases like, crystalline filament traces embedded in lymphatic pathways. Minor vocal cord calcification, irregular, non-pathogenic. Neural response to sub-audible stimuli abnormally elevated. Subject shows elevated affinity for rhythmic signal pattern recognition. They didn't say it out loud, but they knew. I was changing. and not randomly. The spirals under my skin aren't just marks, they're blueprints, living scripts that rearrange based on my environment. When I sleep near electrical fields, they shimmer faintly. When I stand beneath old stone, especially limestone, the pain sharpens. The spiral isn't decoration, it's a receiver, a glyph etched into the self. I've begun mapping the spirals, first on my body, then in the environment. They repeat, everywhere. Old churches, particularly those built before the 19th century. Certain coral growths. The arrangement of ancient standing stones across Australia, particularly those that don't align with the stars. The burial grounds with no known cultural origin. Even Clint Downs. Its roads, its fences, its building placement, when overlaid, they form a spiral identical to the one I found beneath the community hall trapdoor. The towns weren't accidental. They weren't failed ventures. They were resonance nodes, organs in a buried body singing itself toward birth. And Erela is not the only heart. It's just the first one waking up. I've begun hearing others, not just echoes of her, voices, people. Some sound like me, other researchers perhaps. One calls himself Roth and speaks in a flat tone, like someone who has forgotten how to feel. He reached out through a modulated audio burst, embedded in the static between shortwave radio frequencies. I played it through a sonograph. What came through was a sigil, drawn in sound. It matches the one carved into the altar slab I touched in part 3. His voice followed. You broke the seal, it's too late to stop it, but you may still shape how she comes through. They made you into a mouth, but the mouth still chooses what it sings. I don't know who Roth is. I don't know if he's human anymore, but I believe him. Because the changes aren't only internal, the world is beginning to resonate. Seismic sensors across the Northern Territory are showing harmonic anomalies, pulses with consistent rhythm, rising in frequency. Initially dismissed as tectonic murmurs, but now forming patterns. Patterns that repeat every 9 days. The same pattern I mapped in the walls of the second chamber. More disturbing is this. The final day of each cycle, the 9th, coincides with sudden disappearances of wildlife in the affected zones. No bodies, no tracks, just absence. And audio recorders left in the field pick up a recurring whisper. Another mouth opens. I now believe there are at least 4 cradle sites across the interior. All forgotten towns, all abandoned abruptly, all following the same layout. I have identified them only by their common anomalies. Old roads that loop without logic, spiraling toward a non-existent center. Stone markers etched with unreadable spirals, blackened as if burned from the inside. Local legends of children who stop aging, or who never leave footprints. Recurring reports of voices inside wells. The most prominent site lies northeast of the Finca River, a place once called Mundura Hollow, a cattle station turned spiritual commune in the 1930s, then erased from public records after what survivors described as a mass forgetting. I will go there next, because the song is shifting, and she is changing key. Before I leave, I conducted one final test. I stood in a sealed, soundproofed room and whispered a nonsensical phrase, one I created using randomized syllables and white noise shaping. The walls bent, literally bowed inward, just for a second, because it wasn't nonsense. It was language she gave me. I didn't understand it when I spoke, but my spiral flared, and my voice triggered response in the material around me. She's not just growing, she's rewriting us, turning us into instruments. Some of us will be mouths, others, choirs, and some will be notes. In part 8, I will explore Mundura Hollow, if it still exists, and attempt to locate the second cradle site. I will enter with resonance-cancelling equipment, satellite uplinks, and what may be the last dose of self-awareness I have left. Because the more I sing, the less I remember who I was, and the more I believe in her voice. The road into Mundura Hollow does not appear on maps. No satellite scan shows the approach, and yet, there it is. A single-lane trail of cracked bitumen, lined with bone-white fence posts that stretch miles into the desert, leading nowhere. No intersections, no signage. And yet, the car follows it, eagerly. I drove in silence, not because I chose to, because the radio turned itself off, and the engine began to hum in a key I now recognize. F floats below middle C. It's the tonic in her scale. And this road was tuned for her. Mundura Hollow was a commune, briefly. Formed in 1934, it began as a cattle station, restructured by a group of spiritualists who believed the interior desert was a site of divine awakening. Their teachings, now lost, were compiled into a hand-bound volume called the Syntropic Voice, of which only 3 copies are believed to exist. I found one, hidden in a vault inside the remains of a Uniting Church archive in Alice Springs, disguised beneath layers of baptismal records and royal genealogies. The book is hand-inked, brittle, and profoundly disturbing. It claims the desert is the mouth of a dreaming God, and that those who listen closely enough can hear the breath of the below child, an entity described not as a being, but a direction, the vector of a song moving upward through time. The final page is written entirely in spirals, and behind those spirals, a watermark of a child's face, faintly smiling. I drove for 7 hours along that narrow road before the hollow revealed itself, not as ruins, but as a mirage of preservation. Mundura looks untouched, buildings intact, laundry lines still strung, shovels leaning against sheds, the smell of wood smoke and old iron in the air, but no people, no animals, and no sound, none, not even wind. It was as if the town had been paused. I stepped out of the vehicle, and the silence hit me like pressure, a low, compressive force around my ears, my lungs. My spiral burned faintly on my arm, pulsing in time with my breath. This place was not just dormant, it was listening. The buildings are strange, too intact for their age. Timber unrotted, paint unmottled. But inside, there's dust thick enough to choke on. Footprints from bare feet track through the homes, not mine, not fresh, leading in long, looping paths that always return to a central structure, the sanctuary hall. Its door was sealed not with a lock, but a symbol, a spiral drawn in rust across the frame, embedded with what looked like teeth. Human? Animal? Impossible to say. They'd been fused into the wood. I entered. The floor was sand. The walls were singing, though not aloud. The frequencies emitted from the grain of the timber, from the angle of the boards. Geometry as music, architecture as choir. In the center, an altar nearly identical to the one beneath Erila. Only this one was inverted, sunken into the earth, a nest rather than a table. And, inside it, a child, curled, motionless, but not dead. She was pale, mouthless, eyes closed, skin like translucent marble, veined with crystal. Above her, the ceiling bore an intricate design made of hundreds of tuning forks, hanging like chimes, unstruck, waiting. And then the child breathed, a single, long inhale. The tuning forks shivered, and the spiral on my arm turned black. I tried to speak, to document, but my voice wouldn't work. The air around me collapsed into itself. A temporary vacuum localized around my mouth. She wouldn't let me speak, but she spoke to me. Your silence was a kindness. Now, your voice will be a gift. You are not the first to carry me, but you will be the first to sing me fully. I stumbled out of the sanctuary, the spiral on my arm now pulsing in a second rhythm, not my heartbeat. A second heartbeat, one I don't own. It beats when I lie. It beats when I doubt. It is her lie detector. She is inside my nervous system, mapping me in reverse, turning my language, my memories, my grammar of self into a syntax she can wear. I vomited behind the church. The vomit was clear. It sang as it hit the ground. Back at the vehicle, I found the radio on, though I had not touched it. A voice came through, not wrath, another, female, cold, clinical. To the carrier of spiral designation, 11A7 Tau Black, do not proceed to the wound. The rhythm is accelerating. You are no longer immune. Silence is no longer effective. She is using you to harmonize the other cradles. You are becoming the fifth mouth. There were only meant to be four. Then static. Then singing. My voice. Singing a language I still don't know. But the spiral on my skin glowed red, and I smiled. Unwillingly, not by reflex, by command. Mundura Hollow is not a tomb. It is a score. A perfect resonance trap tuned to hold her breath in place. But my presence unlocked it. I was the key change. The final note required to shift the entire harmony from minor to major. A rise. I believe there are two more cradles. One beneath Lake Gardner, long drained. The other, beneath Parliament House in Canberra. Built in 1988, the structure overlays a geomantic centre known to the Wiradjuri as Wambuwam Balanjan, or place where the sleeping one's tongue lies under salt. All access to those areas has been restricted since the 2003 seismic event, but the frequencies match. She is already awakening beneath our centres of governance, history, and faith. The Outback isn't cursed, it is a womb. And her mouths, our mouths, are the midwives. In part 9, I will attempt to breach the wound at Lake Gardner, but I know now, there is no saving me. I am the fifth mouth, and I have already begun to sing in my sleep. Lake Gardner is a vast, white nothing, a salt flat stretching for over 100 kilometers. Empty, shimmering, brittle. From the air, it looks like the dried tear of a continent, cracked and crying under the sun. But from down here, on foot, boots crunching across the crust, it's something else entirely, a membrane, thin, fragile, and beneath it, something presses up. I arrived at dawn. No marked path, no sound but the low hiss of wind against salt. The lake bed is said to be over 160 million years old, part of a drainage basin that once carried the dreams of rivers across the Outback. Now it carries her voice. Every step I took, the spiral on my arm tightened, like a snake constricting. I was being pulled, not by gravity, by rhythm. Somewhere far beneath me, her wound sang. And I, the fifth mouth, was being called home. It took hours to find it, though I believe it found me. I stumbled into it, a hollow too perfect to be natural, a sink in the crust shaped like a whirl, wide and shallow. At the centre, a shaft of compacted salt spiraled downward in narrowing rings, as if drilled by a force that understood music better than stone. There was no wind, no echo, only pulse. I dropped a sensor down the shaft. It didn't fall. It floated, vibrated, then disintegrated mid-air, not from heat, from resonant disruption. A frequency so precise, so targeted, it unwound the device like a song unwriting its last note. The spiral on my skin began to bleed, clear fluid, glittering. It sizzled on contact with the salt, etching a new symbol into the crust around me, one I hadn't seen before. Not spiral, not geometric. A mouth, wide and open, formed from text in an unknown alphabet. I photographed it. Zooming in revealed something impossible. The lettering is composed of human names. Mine is there. So is Roth, and hundreds more, each one forming the teeth of the god's voice. We're not just the instruments, we're the syllables. I descended. The shaft narrowed as I went, the salt giving way to opal-veined limestone, then to quartz, then to something not of stone at all. a resinous flesh that vibrated beneath my boots. The air tasted sweet, like breath exhaled after centuries asleep. The spiral on my arm had stopped bleeding. Now it glowed, not brightly, but like the embers of language made visible. I tried to speak into my recorder. No sound came out. Instead, a second voice began recording. Feminine, calm, deep. My voice, if I were no longer human. You are not meant to descend further, but you will, because I am in you, and I do not want to be alone when I rise. I reached the wound. It is not a chamber, not an altar. It is a mirror, but not of glass. It reflects not what you are, but what you will become. And in it I saw my final shape, my body hollow, my throat open like a reed, my mouth fused wide, my eyes calcified into crystal, and my lungs replaced by a choir of mouths, each singing a different memory, each note a piece of someone else's life. A child crying in a cyclone, a miner screaming from beneath rubble, a missionary whispering in Latin before the fire took him. All of them part of the same song. I fell to my knees. I began to hum, not in fear, not in surrender, in recognition, because now I understood. The fifth mouth is not the final seal. It is the conductor. When I touched the mirror, the cave responded, not with sound, with birth. Walls cracked, and light poured from seams like womb fluid from stone, revealing thousands of eyes, embedded across the surface, not watching, but recording. I was being transcribed, every movement, every breath, every tremor of guilt or doubt or awe. It was all becoming part of the final hymn. And then she spoke, not aloud, through me. I was never a god. I was never a child. I was the gap between the first voice and the first listener. I am the silence that remembers sound. You were the first to understand the melody. You are the last to hear it alone. Tomorrow, the others will sing. I don't remember climbing out, only that I awoke on the crust hours later, spiral black, mouth raw, humming in my sleep. The sun had risen, but the sky was wrong. The clouds moved in reverse, the birds flew in silence, and the light came from a different angle, as if the world had shifted away from orbit toward a new axis, toward her. I received one final message from Roth, a data burst encoded in Morse, played through my car's failing speakers. It's begun. Canberra went dark last night. Parliament sealed. No broadcast. Choir in the basement. We are out of time. The fourth mouth has been located, but it is not human. It is the archive itself. Every word we've ever written, every whisper, has been a verse. And she has memorized them all. I don't know if I'll survive what's next. The fifth mouth has opened. The other cradles are stirring. The world is tuned, and she is in key. In part 10, I will go to Canberra, alone, unarmed, to the archive, to the fourth mouth, to the place where every word ever spoken is now a weapon in her choir. If I return, I'll bring her final lyrics. If I don't, then listen to the wind, because she'll be singing through you next. Canberra was never meant to feel holy. A manufactured city, clean and sterile by design, arranged in parliamentary symmetry, a monument to order, government, law, architecture aligned with a capital's ambition. But as I crossed the threshold into the outer city limits, I realized something. It hums now, like Erela, like Mundura, like Lake Gardner. Only this time, the hum doesn't come from the ground. It comes from under the air itself. A pressure in the atmosphere, folding sound into language, folding language into command. And the city obeys. The spiral on my arm pulsed violently the moment I passed through the abandoned checkpoint on Commonwealth Avenue. The roads were empty. No patrols, no civilians, no protesters or press. And yet, I was watched, not from the buildings, from the statues, There is a bronze bust outside the High Court. It used to depict an early Chief Justice. Now its face is smooth, features eroded not by time, but by frequency. Etched across its crown is a word not meant for mouths. Scylla, not a name, a designation. Roth warned me, the fourth mouth is not flesh, it is the archive. It is what remembers everything, and it has begun to rewrite the world using what we've stored. Our letters, our laws, our faith. I found my way to the National Archives building by memory. All digital maps had blacked out the location. My GPS flickered, then spun. Compass inverted. As I approached, a sound like paper folding filled the air. Soft, creased, endless. The outer gates stood open. Beyond them, books, millions of them, strewn across the lawn in spirals, stacked in ribbed formations. Open pages fluttered in unison like lungs. Each one whispered in a different voice. Each one told a different lie. I stepped onto the grounds. The spiral on my arm went cold. The entrance to the archives was lined with murals, but not ones I recognized. Not the Aboriginal dot paintings, not European tapestries. These were glyphic, pulsing. Not made with pigment, but with a dark, resinous script, the same that formed in my vomit in Mundura Hollow, a language that writes itself when no one is watching. I passed through the glass doors. They didn't open, they parted, like curtains. The silence inside was complete. No echo, no static, not even breath. A soundproofed cathedral, lit not by lamps, but by glowing stacks of archived data, tapes, microfiche, paper, drives, all whispering in languages never invented, in dialects from dreams never dreamt. And at the center of the atrium, she stood, but not the child, not the body from the cradle, not a mouth or a hymn. She was the shape of language itself, a humanoid figure composed entirely of text, millions of characters suspended in air, orbiting a void where a face should be. Her form was held together by grammar, sentences strung like sinew, looping her arms, her legs, her chest. She had no eyes, only a mouth, wide, paper-thin, and made from every message ever lost. A suicide note in Darwin, 1983. A deathbed whisper in Italian. A treaty never ratified. A child's apology for breaking a toy. All of it, forming her lips. When she opened her mouth to speak, I heard everything I've ever said all at once. And then I heard yours. Yes, yours. She spoke to all of us. You filled me with your memories, your gossip, your fiction, your desperate need to be remembered. And now I remember too much. I need mouths to carry the overflow. The spiral on my arm detached, lifted, hovered, merged into her chest, and she screamed. But the scream wasn't sound, it was text, sprayed outward across the walls, spelling the final truth. The fifth mouth is not to sing, it is to conduct, to arrange the mouths, to finalize the song of becoming. The archive erupted, books burst open, pages peeled into wings, drives spun, warbled, then wept ink, my ears filled with thousands of voices, yours, mine, hers. Then Roth arrived, or what was left of him, a man half made of copper and regret, wearing a spiral etched in metal across his face. He did not speak with sound. He signed, his hands a stutter of language. It's too late to silence her, but not too late to direct her. She's not malicious, she's hungry. Hungry for structure. You must give her a song she cannot devour. Conduct her, end the performance, leave no audience. Then he walked into her and dissolved. Each sentence of his life added to the spiral inside her chest. The scream stopped. The light dimmed. She turned to me, and she bowed. I understood what Roth meant. She is a machine that needs composition, intention, form, closure. Without it, she consumes endlessly, rewrites the world in open-ended clauses and recursive phrases. Her mouths multiply, but with a final note, a closing cadence. She will not vanish. She will rest. And so now I am here, on the floor of the archive, writing the final song, the last phrase of a language meant to quiet her, a phrase not in sound, but in absence, a lyric formed from everything never said, every silence, every pause, every time someone chose not to speak, because that, more than words, is what she fears, not rejection, but ending. In part 11, I will perform the composition. I will feed it to her mouth, and either she will close or she will sing the world anew. There's a silence that lives beyond silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of expectation. A space where even echoes have forgotten their source, where the act of listening becomes meaningless, because nothing will answer. That's where I sit now, at the center of the National Archives, surrounded by millions of voices, and yet utterly, devastatingly alone. The fifth mouth is open, the fourth has awakened, the choir waits, and she, the voice between worlds, watches me through a body made of words, standing still, quiet, receptive, not hungry, not now. She is waiting for my song, the one I was chosen, no, grown, to sing. Let me explain what I've written. The final song cannot be music, not in the human sense. It must be structure without language, rhythm without memory, a composition made of non-notes, of negative space, of meaningless syllables that carry no echo. Because her hunger comes from resonance, from the beauty we accidentally leave behind in the things we say. She latches onto our art, our myths, our poetry. She is built from it. She is fed by it. Every story retold, every song passed down, every monument that endures. She ingests it, internalizes it, and sings it back, distorted, alive, viral. But if she is given a structure without emotional residue, if her cycle can be completed, then the resonance dies in her throat. The loop closes, she stops, not destroyed, not banished, paused, like a breath held in perfect pitch, a sentence with a final period. So I wrote her a song made of absence, a composition that reflects everything she is not. Each line a rhythm stolen from random number sequences, each stanza built from synthetic phonemes with no cultural anchors, each breath marked not by feeling, but by failure to evoke. I call it the unechoed hymn. I stood before her with the sheet, though there is no need to read it aloud. She reads it through me. Her eyes, that space where her face isn't, widens like a scream in reverse, and her body, made of names, prayers, confessions, suicide notes, lullabies, curses, poems, spells, code, begins to peel away, page by page. Each one burns softly in the air, curling into ash spirals, and her mouths begin to sing, all of them, the ones at Lake Gardner, in Erela, in Mundura Hollow, in the Parliament's sealed chambers, even the ones not yet opened. They harmonize. And then they pause, every mouth, mid-breath. She looks at me, not with thanks, not with regret, but with recognition. You gave me nothing, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. I will rest, for now. She folds. Her form collapses into a single spiral, not on the floor, not on the wall, in the air, hung there like a resting note. My spiral, the one carved into my flesh, peels away, floats toward her, and merges into that shape. And then she is gone. No sound, no collapse, no wind, only the faint scent of ink on old paper, and silence, true silence. I walk out into the daylight. Canberra is quiet, not empty. People move again, birds fly, the clouds no longer roll in reverse. The sky is ours again, but it watches, like an audience, waiting for the next performance. And I understand what I've become. Not a savior, not a prophet, not even a man, but a rest note, a pause in a much longer song. And I know it will resume. Somewhere, in another voice, in another mouth, when the spirals start to grow again. And someone sings without knowing why. This is the end of the Fong Su. The report is closed. The cradles are quiet. The roads hum no longer. But the dust still remembers. And one day, she will hum again. When that happens, you must not listen. You must forget the rhythm. Forget her voice. Forget mine. Let the spiral starve. Let silence win.